Hi, I'm Joe Sorge, and welcome to the Family Law Report, where we examine the problems and challenges facing our family law system. Today we have the good fortune to interview Andy Ostrowski, who is running as the Democratic candidate for United States Congress in Pennsylvania's 11th District. Andy is running on a platform that includes reforming our court system and instituting real oversight where it's so desperately needed. This is part one in a two-part series. Andy, thank you for agreeing to be on the show.
Thank you, Joe. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us about your platform. What do you hope to bring to the American people?
My message, the one thing that I've been really staying true to in this campaign and what motivated me to run for this office was these issues of losing our courts. We are losing our freedoms in this country on an incremental basis because we are losing our courts. And the effort that you're talking about, deals with the domestic relations courts, the divorce, the family law courts. I've met a lot of people over the years who have suffered greatly and unnecessarily through those domestic relations courts. And some of the stories that I hear are just heart-wrenching and tragic.
So you're a civil rights lawyer who has appeared in courts many times. Tell us about your experience with our judicial system.
As a practicing attorney, and just for your record and for the listeners, I don't have my license right now. I'm under a suspended law license, and there's a story to be told on my site about that. But I have done things like I have sued court systems and lawyers on behalf of people who have been suffering through the domestic relations courts.
Andy, sorry, I'm going to cut you off. Do you think you lost your law license because you bucked the system?
I would say that there is no question in my mind, in retrospect, in light of some of the things that I've learned, that my advocacy for the individual and my opposition to the way the system, the judicial system was working, was a very significant factor. Basically, but for my background and the types of cases that I did and the people that I represented, I would not have been disciplined to the extent that I was.
Isn't there some kind of code of silence amongst lawyers and judges that you don't criticize the system?
Well, that's effectively what happens. And there are statistics to support the fact that civil rights lawyers in particular, those lawyers like myself who are out representing the rights of the individual, are disciplined at greater and disproportionate rates and are sanctioned at greater and disproportionate rates.
And do you think you get especially harassed when you sue the government?
Absolutely.
Give us an example.
We had a program in place in Pennsylvania that was eradicated and nobody knew about it and nobody knew how they did it. And I had figured it out, and I had sued our former governor, Tom Ridge, over it and some of his upper echelon people. That case, got me a lot of negative attention from judges and lawyers. I had lawyers contact my former law firm and say, you got to get rid of him. I had my former law firm come to me and say, hey, Andy, these cases that you're taking are just too sensitive.
You were involved in some sensitive cases against Penn State University, as I recall. Tell us about those.
I started pushing these issues and trying to get depositions of the president of Penn State University and some of these other people that ultimately ended up being implicated in some of the misconduct surrounding the Jerry Sandusky matter. And Joe, I got very seriously mistreated and I was looked at as an outcast. And I got, a lot of hostile treatment from attorneys and judges at me because I dared to talk about these things.
Did Penn State try to cover up the fact that they had a child predator on staff?
The lawyers at Penn State knew as early as 1998 that they had a child predator on their campus, and they knew his identity was Jerry Sandusky. The lawyers at Penn State, rather than coming forward and ending that and saving the lives of children, chose to control information to try to protect the institution. And, if people, if judges and lawyers and courts had paid attention, a lot of lives would have been saved and potentially not been ruined.
So how do we stop our government from trying to cover up for its bad actors?
Where I begin with responding to that question is a lawsuit that I filed last week. And the lawsuit effectively sues the entire judicial system of the state of Pennsylvania, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and declares or seeks a declaration that is in violation of the United States Constitution.
So how is the Pennsylvania judicial system in violation of the United States Constitution?
There is a constitutional provision in Pennsylvania that effectively eradicated the checks and balances and separation of powers principles that are the core of Article 4 of the United States Constitution.
How did it do that?
It placed all powers in the judiciary, or all powers over the judiciary, in the judiciary itself. All rulemaking, all standards of conduct for judges and lawyers, and it went to the next step to say any powers enacted, any laws enacted by a legislature that conflict with or that intercede or intervene in this field of jurisdiction are declared null and void. So it removed the judiciary completely from the checks and balances of the other two branches of government.
You know, in my opinion, self-policing never works, but for some reason, judges think they're capable of doing it. What do you think?
The judiciary is incapable of disciplining itself because of these structural constitutional things that we're talking about. There is no outside check on the powers and duties of lawyers and judges in courts. And that's a huge, huge problem.
You know, I have an idea. What if the legislature just cut off all funding to the judiciary and fired the judges en masse?
Budgetary string is the one control that the legislature has over the judiciary. I don't know, the problem though, Joe, that you get is so the lawyers are now senators and they're now representatives and they're now on the staffs of all these legislators. So, lawyers effectively control the country because you could have a rogue independent legislature who gets to that point of frustration or intolerance of what's going on and tries to put the clamps down on it. But the problem is in this system, we accept what lawyers say. We make them more or less an elevated class and, everybody relies on it. And that's really the artifice of control in all of this.
Well, I've got a solution for that. Let's encourage the public to never elect another lawyer ever again, except the ones who've had their law licenses suspended, of course. So when you get to Congress, how would you restore the checks and balances over the judiciary that are now missing?
I'm really, going to try to do something along the lines of what Elizabeth Warren has done with her Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and make it like a Citizens Judicial Protection Bureau, where we establish a commission where people from across the country can come to, an independent commission staffed by non-attorneys, maybe one or two attorneys, one or two judges or whatever, but largely non-attorneys, to bring their complaints about corruption in the courts. Anytime anybody has a problem with the judicial corruption or a problem in the courts, it's a federal constitutional issue. So I think that there is firm footing and firm ground to say that if you have a state court corruption and abuse issue, you can bring it to this federal commission, and that's how we're going to regulate and control the judiciary of these kind of rogue, state courts.
That's a fabulous idea.
And then there's small things like, guaranteeing that there's cameras in every courtroom. There's absolutely no excuse for something like that in this day and age, for judges to just have court reporters sitting in there with an old stenographic equipment. We need cameras in the courtroom. We need access to all this information. We need the press. We need a free and open press getting into court. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And we're not going to stop on this issue. We got a problem in the courts in this country. I've devoted my life to it. I'm going to continue to devote my life to it. And, we're going to fix this system somehow or other, and we'll figure out those details as we go.
Thank you so much for speaking out in this part 1 of the interview. We'll continue our discussion in part 2.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, an attorney and potential U.S. congressman speaking out about the problems within our judicial system. If you'd like to hear more, join us for part 2 of our interview with Andy Ostrowski, where we will delve into the root causes for potential corruption between attorneys and judges. I'm Joe Sorge, and this is the Family Law Report. Thank you.